Hello, hello, good evening, everyone. Hello, hello, and good evening. I am Mrs. Ann, and I am the visionary of Smack Talk, where Smack stands for sisters, mothers, aunts, and cousins, where our mission is simply to affirm, confirm, mold, and motivate you to be all you were created to be. And I am so excited to be here on tonight. You guys know if you've been watching either the author page or the Smack Talk community or my YouTube channel, we have been doing promotional videos with the speakers for the annual Smack Talk Huddle. We started out with Chatney talking about a single woman's worth, and then we had Radera on talking about a married woman's worth. We had Lauren on talking about a divorced woman's worth. And tonight we are here with my daughter talking about a mother's worth. And how awesome is it that she can share a mother's worth from a mother's perspective as well as from a daughter's perspective as it relates to moi, her mommy, right? So this is going to be a really, really good conversation. I am really, really hoping that for those of you that come onto either the Smack Talk community page or you catch this on Boss Life Mom, or you catch this on anybody's platform that have shared this video. I am really hoping that you listen, tune in with your Holy Ghost ears. And I want you to really hear the depthness of this conversation, because this conversation is one like none other, right? Because this relationship is like none other. And so I am going to be bringing TeLeah on in just a moment so that she can introduce herself. But again, as you guys come into the StreamYard, as you can see, or you can come onto the live, StreamYard is asking you to grant permission so that we can see who you are as you post. Also, if you have not already registered for the annual Smack Talk Huddle, please go ahead and go to WeSmackTalk.com. Make sure that you get registered and make sure that you share this video, because again, this is a dynamic conversation that needs to be heard by millions of ears all across the globe, right? And hopefully it's going to bring healing into some relationships, and we are going to be able to empower those that we come in contact with to be able to heal beyond whatever has happened in their life that have hurt them. But again, without further ado, I am going to bring none other than TeLeah Thurston. She is the speaker for A Mother's Worth at the annual Smack Talk Huddle. And TeLeah, please, please, please welcome. Thank you so much for joining me in purpose. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the Smack Talk community and tell them what it is that you do.
So, as she said, my name is TeLeah. If you don't already know that, TeLeah Thurston. I am the founder of Boss Life Mom, which is a nurturing community for mothers where I educate them on the value of establishing community, rebuilding their confidence, and understanding interdependence. So, as you know, she's my mother. I just want to say thank you for having me. Not just because I'm your daughter, but because you actually understand the value in what it is that I bring to the table. And oftentimes you tell me that you learn from me. And so I know that it's not just because of our relationship, but because we actually have grown as women together. So I just want to say thank you for having me.
Yes, yes, yes. And I hope you guys caught that. And because I do, I tell her all the time that I learn so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about just womanhood as a whole. And I don't think that there's too many parents out there that can say that they actually learn from their children. And not just her. I have a total of 6 living children that I birthed. And so I learned from all of my kids because we have that type of relationship. And all parents can't say that they have that they can actually learn from their kids. And so I raised them to a certain degree, and now they're helping me to grow up. And so like she said, she is the founder of Boss Life Mom, which I think is so cool because Boss Life Mom, when I look at her as a mother. It really embodies a lot of what I think a lot of people don't get as it relates to parenting, marriage, just living life, period. That Boss Life Mom community kind of embodies all of that. So if you guys are not following Boss Life Mom, please make sure that you go. I don't know if you said, I didn't catch it. Did you say you're also a life coach?
Yes, I am.
She is a life coach too. Yes, yes. And so, and it's so funny because I'm always like, girl, what you waiting on? Like, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? She's a life coach and she's also a writer. And so she get it from her mom. And so, and TeLeah, we're just going to really dive into this conversation because I think that there's a lot to unpack as it relates to talking about the worth of a mother. And I have to segue this conversation with this, right? Anybody that see TeLeah and I communicate with one another might think, oh, they have such a wonderful relationship, right? And so, but it wasn't always that way. We had our typical mom daughter moments where she absolutely probably hated me. Truth be told, I don't know of any daughter that doesn't go through that stage. Well, I'm not gonna say all. There are some daughters that like, oh, my mom's my best friend. Yeah, well, we didn't have that. And so there were times when she didn't want to be in my presence. And so it was her literally going through that phase of life that took her across the map, to another state. And so, like I said, I have to segue the conversation with the fact that relationships have to grow, right? And we have to have enough grace in order for those relationships to grow. So for anybody who may be watching this live, if you might catch the replay, please hashtag replay, by the way. We will come back and respond to you. And so anybody who is listening to this conversation, if you don't have the best of relationships with your parent, it's okay, right? Because God will put people in your life a reason, a season, and then there are those people that are there for a lifetime. And sometimes you have to work through the relationships to get them to the point that they need to be. And that's one of the things that we had to do. And so we started embarking upon this journey probably about 2010-ish, about 2000. Yeah, about 2010, when she was literally over on foreign soil. And so, TeLeah, you are one of the speakers for the huddle. You're talking about a mother's worth. And so I wanted to segue that because my question to you is, you growing up with your mother, moi, that being me, what was your view of motherhood growing up in the house with me? And this is a time when y'all probably gonna be like, "Ooh, they're gonna fight afterwards." But no, this is TeLeah and I. We talk all the time about her upbringing. Is very therapeutic, not only for her but for me, because I have to be held accountable to the things that I made a mistake in, so that I know how to be a better parent and how to support my kids spiritually as well as emotionally. So some of the things that you guys hear, you might be shocked that it's coming out of her mouth. And so, but she has the platform, she has the free will to say however she felt at that time, because I know how she views me now. So go ahead.
So, growing up, I would say you were a little bit of a helicopter slash controlling parent, but also there were times where you were not present. Like you were physically there, but mentally you were like, I don't know where you were.
I don't either, girl.
And I think that
Where's she at?
yeah, it's interesting because I feel like even during the times where we weren't close, and I literally would say things like, "Oh my God, I hate my mom," I was still like not stuck, but like how do I put, like I was still like I wanted to be around you, even though we didn't really have a relationship. And so and that goes even from childhood to teen years. I just always had somehow, I maybe because we kind of grew up together, had that connection
Mm-hmm.
with you having me young. And even though you were like working, I think that that is what had allowed us to have that connection. But I would say you were definitely that type of parent. It was like you wanted to protect us from things that you experienced, but you didn't really have the tools or the resources to really know what you were doing. You just knew I have to protect my children, and in doing that, um, it ended up kind of, while it did help, it also restricted us in ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Answer
Yeah.
that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that I can remember times when I literally um I remember there were times when I would literally like I have to keep this wedge between myself and my children, because one of the things that I absolutely positively did not want was for any of y'all to get stuck in 49022. And when I say stuck, I'm not talking about like physically being in the 49022, but being stuck in your mind that you can't go anywhere, right? Because for me personally, I grew up in this area, and because of the dynamics of my relationship with my mother, I grew up being this caretaker and not ever feeling that I had the freedom to leave. And I didn't want that to be, the thing that bound you guys to the 49022 area. Like I knew that there was a world outside of the 49022 area, and I didn't want you guys to grow up with the fears that I grew up with. And like you said, sometimes you can want to protect your children so much, and it can be so much so to a detriment almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that was kind of, the situation for me. It was like I drew this wedge, and it caused more harm in some ways than good. And I'm not going to say more harm, but it caused harm in some ways more so than good. And so as a result, we started to grow apart from one another. Although anybody that saw us was like, oh, like a lot of your friends and siblings would come around like, oh, she's a cool mom, and TeLeah would be like, I don't know why y'all like her. She's mean, and so, but it was my relationship, to you guys. I think that kind of, because when you don't live with a person, of course, you don't know behind the scenes what the person is really like. And so a lot of people saw me with the smiles. A lot of people saw that part, but they didn't know the turmoil that you guys had to live with on a day-to-day basis. And just that sentence just took me back to a conversation that I just had recently with one of the boys. And he said to me, I remember when you and dad would get into it, how you would yell at us, and so sometimes we can deflect our feelings onto our children. And that's not healthy. And so, like you said, in a lot of ways, we actually grew up together. And so in that context, there had to be a lot of growing, there had to be a lot of healing, there had to be a lot of deliverance that started to take place. And so that deliverance, like I said, our journey started about 2009, 2010, when you went to Afghanistan, and you were stationed over in Afghanistan. And I remember talking to you one time and telling you, when you come back, you got to go to this encounter retreat. And that was literally the beginning of the breaking. And so I have to say that as it relates to much of the things that have taken place within the dynamics of the Jeffries family, I'm going to say it like that. Much of the things that have taken place in the context of that has literally been it has been the manifestation of the promise that God gave me, as it related to me having the third of you guys. And so, and I've shared this before. Um, I've shared this before. When I was pregnant with my third child, I only wanted two kids. I literally only wanted two kids. That was all I could handle was two, one on each hand. If you go in the store, you got one child on each hand. That's all I could handle. And I remember being pregnant with the third one. And I remember just going through this state of this, like, oh my God, I'm going to have three kids. What am I going to do with the third child? I don't have the two hands. What am I literally? What am I going to do with the third child? And I remember not sharing with my husband at the time. I remember not sharing with him that I was pregnant because I literally prayed. I literally prayed that I would fall down the stairs and miscarry. I literally would pray that I didn't break a bone, but that I would miscarry. And I remember sometime into the pregnancy, and I always say, God does things strategically. And I had to know that it was him because I was on the third step. And after getting on the third step of praying my little prayer, a voice, an audible voice, spoke to me and said, you having this child is going to be the breaking of the generational curse on your family. That was in 1996. And I had absolutely no idea what that meant, right? Until 2001. And so, like I said, everything that has culminated in the context of the Jeffries family has literally been from that promise. Because things have to happen in order for curses to be broken. Some things have to happen. Something has to be broke, right? The Bible says, I forget where the scripture is at because I know a lot of scripture, but I don't be knowing the address. And so, but the scripture says that when God put the clay, when God put when the clay was on the potter's wheel, he made it again another. And I liken that until how Holy Spirit, how the Lord deals with us. He will put us on this refiner's potter's wheel, and he will continue to make us and mold us into the perfect vessels that he desires for us to be, right? And so, again, there had to be some breaking that had to take place. And so I always have to share that testimony because, like I said, people see us now, but they don't know the absolute hell that have happened. They don't know the absolute tears that have been shed amongst these two faces that you see today. And so it's one of those things where, you know, a lot of times, like I said, we can't learn from our children because we're so busy being the parent. But I want to say to parents who may be watching this live, humble yourself. Humble yourself, because if you listen and you listen closely, your children will teach you valuable lessons. They really will. And so one of the things that I'm so grateful for is that TeLeah doesn't walk and hold this level of animosity. Now, that's not to say that she doesn't think about things that have hurt. I know she does. Some things we talk about, some things we don't. But I give her the grace to come to me when she needs to. And I have never shut the door and said, oh, I don't want to hear that. That's in the past. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. You need to stop and you need to listen to your kids and you need to hear them when they speak. Because if that's what it takes in order for healing to take place throughout your generation, because think about this from this perspective, what you hold on to, it's going to spill over into the next generation, right? Because it's a lot of unspoken stuff that my grandmother didn't share with my mother didn't share with me. There are things that my mother and we cannot talk about because my mother is not in a place where she can hold responsibility for her lifestyle and how it impacted me. I realized that I wasn't a perfect parent by far. And I realized that a lot of the decisions that I made, a lot of the things that I allowed to occur, it impacted my kids in a negative way. And so I have to say, yo, you know what? I didn't do anything intentionally. And I'm here to walk with you through this healing process because we all have to heal. That being said, my baby was the oldest of 6 kids, right? So she raised a lot of kids. I'm just going to let her take over from right here because I didn't talk enough. I'm going to let her take over from right here.
So there was something you said Near the beginning, there was a few things that I wanted to speak to. I should have like made notes, but when you talked about being like not wanting to be stuck mentally, it was one of our private conversations, but it made me think about our conversation about like the poverty mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can be you can be in a place and want to leave a place, but you can still take the negative with you. And so
Yes.
while
Yes.
I was ready to, even though you were always teaching us like be better, do better, I inherently knew I do not want to be like my mom. I don't want to get stuck here. I don't want to be with someone who's making me do everything by myself. I had all these what I wasn't going to do, but I still left and went somewhere else with the same type of thought process. And so it's important to change your own mindset so that you can help somebody else change theirs. So if a parent isn't willing to change their mindset or to even be open to hearing another mindset, it does limit what the next person or the next generation can do.
Yes.
um but as the oldest of six, and I think anyone who is the oldest in their family can attest to, somehow you become the second, especially if both parents, it's not a healthy family relationship. The oldest sibling ends up being the co-parent in the family. And so in my situation, um I had a great stepfather. And when I was a little, he took me in as his own, and we still have an amazing relationship now. And then there was a time in my mom's life where it was just her, and I just naturally, I was already close to her, so I just naturally took responsibility. Now I won't say I naturally took responsibility, but I naturally had to fall into when the other parent, when the secondary parent wasn't doing their part, or my mom wasn't mentally, emotionally, or spiritually present, I had to do what it was that needed to be done. So a lot of times I was the one having conversations with my siblings about life, or literally with my younger brothers, having to literally feed them, change their diapers. I was doing all of that. And so at, as a teenager, I was like, yeah, I don't want to have kids. Um, it's too much work. Like, I have five other siblings, and my sister at the time, like growing up, I wasn't necessarily responsible for her. But as I got older and our relationship grew, I was the one always providing the advice and wisdom and things like that. And I was exhausted. And I was only 18. Like, I was literally in the I joined the military at 17. And so I was already mentally exhausted. Like, I'm tired of being responsible for other people. And even though my mom was very self-sufficient in a sense, I think that there was a part of me that also felt like I had to be responsible for her as well, because there's a lot of things that I didn't have the words for, but in my heart and in my mind, I knew they were wrong. And so my mom had a very like, she's small but mighty. Like, she got a voice on her, but there was a part of me that knew she's overly strong and she shouldn't have to be. But I didn't know why or what that was supposed to look like. And so by the time I got became an adult, I was like, yeah, I don't want to have kids, or became a graduated teenager. I was like, I don't want to have kids. It's too much work. But of course, look, here's one now. Um, the enemy, being a teenager, you're looking for love, right? In all the wrong places. I ended up getting pregnant in high school. And my immediate response was another one. My immediate response was, I don't want this child. Like, I was freaking out. I was like, this is too much responsibility. And short, like literally, probably within maybe an hour or so, I came back to my mom and I said, I want to keep it. After I had told her, I don't want to keep it. And I didn't have the language for it. I just knew I was afraid, but I knew that the wrong decision would have been to abort. And that's a testimony for a whole nother day. I won't get all the way into that. But because I had an abortion, it then created a void. And so at that point, because I had gotten pregnant, I had heard a child's heartbeat, I had seen the fetus. At that point, I wanted to have a child. And so fast forward, I got married. Um, that's the whole story for another day. Got married. We ended up within our 1 year anniversary getting pregnant with our oldest daughter. And I was excited, but my excitement came from feeling a void. And then, God being God, you always got your own plan. God's got another plan for you. We had three more children right behind that. And so before I knew it, I was sitting there with four kids, little kids. My kids are now 3, 5, 6, and 7. But at the time when they were, well, actually before my fourth was even born, I was sitting there with three under three. And I was like, oh my God, like what has happened? And my husband, I'm a veteran and my husband is active duty in the military. And at the time he was going through a course that literally he was like rarely home. Like people with our family was laugh and joke about him coming home to get me pregnant and then leave again. Like he was always gone. And so I was exhausted, like literally exhausted. And then it wasn't until the fourth child was born, I was having a conversation with my sister, and she was like, do you think that the reason you're so burnt out is because now you have four kids, but you had to help raise four little brothers? And I was like, that's exactly what it is, because I didn't want to be responsible for anybody. And then before I looked up and knew it, I was responsible for myself. I was responsible for my husband and my kids. And before I had them, I was just getting to a place of really understanding myself. And so with that, it really just, it caused me to have to take a step back because with my kid, like I said, my kids were young. They were 3, 2, and 1. And then I think it was 18 months. Jonah was 18 months when we found out we were pregnant with the fourth. That was when I feel like the world started to really crush me in a sense. I started having anxiety, panic attacks, all type of stuff because I really never had the opportunity to deal with anything that I was going through. And I was taking it out on my husband. I was taking it out on my kids. And they were too young. All of them, they were too young to understand. And my husband is just like, well, I'm doing everything I can to help you. So what else can be done? So yeah.
Wow. Wow. You guys, look, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is helping y'all. I really don't, but I really hope that it is. And Chadney said, everyone, make sure you share this live. Yes, please, and thank you. This is it. Healing comes in layers. Matter of fact, one of our spiritual leaders posted, hi TeLeah, Lori Nastrom. She was one of our leaders for the healing process in many of the retreats that we went to. And so, but this is so therapeutic. It's so therapeutic because if you don't take anything else from this conversation, um, uh, take away from what Chatney said. The transparency and openness between TeLeah and I is refreshing to see and hear. If you don't take anything else, take that away. And please, parents, please, children, have open conversations. Have open conversations. No matter how, I cannot lie to you and tell you that there's not things that my kids tell me that it doesn't kind of poke a little bit. It kind of pricks a little bit because first and foremost, my level of sensitivity, my level of love for my children. Anybody will hear me say often, I don't like kids. I don't like kids. I don't. But I love young people. I love children because they're living beings and they are literally the walking examples of every mistake that we've ever made. And we have the opportunity to go back and pour into them and help them to elevate and not make the same mistakes. And that's something that TeLeah said earlier was I had such a level of protection over my kids that because I didn't want them to make the same mistakes. Like I had 6 kids, y'all. My kids didn't go do stayovers at other people's house. They friends came to my house because I knew what was going on in my house. At one time I counted 12, 12 kids in my house one
It
time.
was more than that.
Yeah, I'm sure probably more than that at one point in time because I wanted my kids around. I wanted to see, I wanted to hear, I wanted to know what was going on. And they still got some stuff past me. They did. They were some slick little jokers. But I used to always tell this one, I know who your mom and your daddy is. So don't lie to me. I know who your mom and your daddy is. And so, but it was one of those situations where I just didn't want my kids to have to experience a lot of the stuff that I experienced. And what better way to do that than to keep them around me so that I could be the influence in their life pouring into them. I wanted them, I always tell my kids, I do not want you to go out there into this world and get, pardon my French, screwed without Vaseline. I did not want that to happen. I didn't want them to get out there into this cruel world and not have a sense of the reality of life. So I always talked to them very openly and told them, like, hey, this is what it is. You know, this is how real life is. And there is absolutely nothing that my kids cannot come to me and talk to me about. Absolutely nothing. And I know a lot of parents say that, but then when it comes to certain things, they, no, 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 no. Your kids need to be able to have the conversations with you that they're going to go have with their friends because their friends ain't going to give them the right information. And hopefully you have enough protectiveness inside of you that you're going to sit there and you're going to hear them from their friend's perspective. And you're going to talk to them from a parental friendly perspective, right? I will never forget. My daughter came to me and told me something about something between her and her husband. And I just laughed because I was like, you really telling me this? Like, for real, you are really telling me this, you know? And so, but it was one of those situations where there was a level of comfort that she could come to me. But guess what? I hit her with the word. I hit her with the word. Baby, what did it ever occur to you that this is happening because you doing this out of order? Right? So that's the loving part. That's what a friend should say. But a friend will be like, girl, you better go to the doctor. You better find out what's going on. You know, they'll come up with some foolishness like that. Right. But no, how about God trying to check you? How about that? You know, and so like I said, you need to have real conversations with your children. Children need to be able to have those real and tangible conversations with their parents. And for those of you that are on this live, when I leave, I'm gonna literally go and check and see who all shared the live. I know some people did, but y'all make sure y'all sharing this live. Make sure you sharing it. I want everybody to click share. Everybody stop right now and click share, right? Just click share. And y'all know what? Those likes, if you tap the screen, it will boost up the location and where the live shows up in the algorithms. So y'all make sure y'all tapping the screen, get those hearts going. Okay.
I want to add something too.
Okay, go ahead.
About parents listening. I think it's important to note or to mention, like, you don't have to, as a parent, when your child is bringing you something, because I know sometimes, at least from what I've seen, not with my mom, but just in different experiences, which I'm grateful for, but you don't have to necessarily, because it's going to be different perspectives, right? Like, there are times when me and my mom have conversations and I'm like, this is what it was to me. And she'd be like, no, that's not what it was. And there's two different ways this conversation can go. Because there's some stuff where she just mentally wasn't there and doesn't recall. But there's also times where I was viewing it because I was a child. It was a child and she was the parent or she's the adult in the situation. So there's going to be times where you may not, like, you're going to have the conversation, but y'all may not necessarily agree on what's being said. Mm-hmm. But it's not the conversation. Having the conversation is not necessary for the person to agree. It's just for you to get it out. So there are times, like, I'm trying to think about. So there's a recent conversation with me and my mom, not recent, but we were having a conversation about my biological father. And her response, I wanted her response to be different than when it was, but I didn't allow myself to get upset that she wasn't like agreeing with me. She wasn't agreeing or disagreeing. She just wasn't saying what I wanted to hear. And I couldn't allow myself to get upset like, oh, she's taking his side. I just had to say, you know what, her perspective with this person is totally different than my perspective, and we may never agree, and that's okay, but I'm glad that I'm able to say what I got to say to her.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's just a matter of listening, and you can take however you feel about it between you and God or whoever. Some of y'all don't may not believe in God, you should, but if you don't, you can have that conversation with somebody else, with another adult or whatever. And even for the child, like your parent may say some stuff that you feel like is wrong or you don't agree. Promise, I had a conversation with an older person in my family, and they said something super off the wall. In that moment, I'll be honest and say I got upset, but I had to realize that her mindset totally different from my mindset. I have the tools, I have the resources to educate myself. Now, am I excusing them? No, because it's 2023 and there are plenty of resources and education out there for all of us, no matter how young or old you are. But it's a choice. And so at the end of the day, you have to tell yourself that person is choosing to stay in their mindset, and that's not your fault. So I just had to add that part.
Absolutely. And that was real good, because many times, like you said, many times we want the other person to say what we want them to say, and that may not be the case. Case in point, whenever you come to me and you're sharing your perception, right,
Mhm.
about many of the things that occurred when you guys were growing up, it's like, yeah, I can see your point, but like you said, a lot of times you're even the scripture says, when I was a child, I thought as a child, I spake as a child. And when I became an adult, I put aside childish thinking. And so there's been many times when, and it's just a matter of time, right? There's been many times when you've come back to me and said, I remember so and so and so and so. Now I understand. And
Yeah.
so, and it's funny because many times we don't understand because we're children. I remember writing a letter to my mom telling her that I hated her because she didn't buy me something that I wanted. And honey, my cousin got a hold to that letter. I have a cousin named Prentice. We call her Tina. And Prentice was like the second mama, right? And my mother was like her big sister slash mother. And so she she came to the house and she told me, she said, if you ever say something like that, but she didn't use them kind words like that to your mama again, I will beat you senseless myself. Needless to say, I never let anything like that happen ever again. Never, right? I did not make that mistake ever again, right? And so, but I said all of that to say what it was that I was upset about. It was it was related to something that I had no clue about, right? I didn't know how the finances went in our household or anything like that because I didn't see, and this, kind of goes back to not bringing your kids up and overindulging them. All I knew is when I asked for something, I got what I wanted pretty much. That's all I knew. So why are you telling me no now, right? Why are you telling me no? So I didn't bring my kids up like that because that didn't make sense to me. And so, like you said, when you have that ability to be able to just say, but then having, once you get to a certain age, having the maturity to say, well, you know what, we're looking from two different lenses, right?
Right.
We're not going to see things from the same perspective. And simply because as we grow, as we get older, as society changes, like the things that you experience, your kids are going to come up with something totally different. It's going to be on a totally different level because now kids are even more overly indulged than they were back then, even in the 90s. And so that whole dynamic, it brings something totally different to the table, and it causes other riffraffs in the dynamics of, the family wholeness. And so I'm glad you mentioned that. So I just want to stop for a moment and just say again, everybody who's on the live, please make sure that you share the live. Also, if you have not already signed up for the annual Smack Talk Huddle, this is how we roll. This is how we do it, right? And so if you like this conversation, just imagine what it's going to be like when you're listening to 11 different speakers, and they're all giving you nothing but pouring out nothing but wisdom. On Friday night, we're going to be talking about the worth of a woman from a male perspective. I think that conversation, in and of itself, is enough for you to be there because I'm a firm believer that we as women, we will have a totally different onset of how we view ourselves and how we carry ourselves and the decisions that we make as it relates to literally stepping out the door, how we dress. I keep about to tear my computer up. How we dress, how we walk, how we talk. Like I was having a conversation with my nephew and I said to him, I was like, I bet if females knew that men really didn't care about hair down to their ankles and these claws and these carpets on their face, they call them eyelashes. I bet if they knew that men didn't really care about all of that stuff, they probably would stop wasting their money, right? Because when they put on all of that stuff, Jenny, when they put on all of that stuff, like literally, you got to take all of that off. And when you take it all off, it's you down to the plain old you. Literally, you are down to the plain old you. You can't wear that stuff 24/7, right? So if a man approaches you with all of this stuff on, what is he actually talking to you for? Now, this was coming from a 30, help me out, Lauren. How old is Antoine? This was coming from a 30-some-year-old man saying this. Like, yeah, we don't want all of that. I need you in all natural. And
I
so
like
that's how we came up with the talking about the worth of a woman from a male perspective. Yes, coming from a 33-year-old. That's how we came up with talking about the worth of a woman from a male perspective. So, like I said, if you are not there for no other conversation, you need to be there on Friday night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., where we're going to be talking to a panel of men that are going to be giving you the uncut truth about the worth of a woman from a single woman's perspective, a married woman's perspective, a mother's perspective, a woman in ministry's perspective, and a woman in business perspective. So that's going to be a dynamic conversation. And then on Saturday, we're going to come back and there's going to be myself, there's going to be Chatney, there's going to be TeLeah, Lauren, there's going to also be Radera and Karen Wilder. And we're going to be just having a dynamic conversation with you guys. So make sure that you go and you get registered for the huddle right now while those tickets are on the low. Yes, yes. And men are invited this year. So just know that we need to have the men in the room because that's going to make the conversation for the men a little bit easier because, men don't have a whole lot to say about a lot of stuff. And then you have those that they have way too much to say, but all they doing is blah, 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 and they're not really saying anything, right? So, yes, make sure that you go and register. Also, if you register and you get the regular registration ticket, you automatically get an entry into the drawing for the 55-inch television. The sale tickets does not include that drawing. However, you can purchase a raffle ticket for sponsorship for $25. You get 6 tickets for $100 for the television. And for the Samsung Chromebook, the tickets are $20 each or 6 tickets for $100. So yes. But anyway, we're going to keep it moving. We're almost done. We're going to be letting you guys go really quickly. But just want to come back and just touch bases on this. Couple of things. Do you feel that you had the proper example of what a healthy parental bond looked like?
absolutely not.
And why do you feel that you did not have a clear perspective of a healthy parental bond?
Um, that's a good question. But I feel like I didn't because of your the choices you made in men.
I said parental bond, not relationship.
Well, it go they go
I
hand
guess
in
it's
hand.
both.
They do. Some people think they are separate, but they do go hand in hand. Um,
Okay.
because for example, using I'm gonna use my dad as an example. It's important. I really one of the things that I hope that women do, um, and I'm gonna say it this way simply because of the world we live in. But whether you're married or not, if you are sexually active, think about who. Like my great grandma used to say it all the time. But you really should be
Yes,
mindful
she did.
of who you have children with. Like if
Yes.
you're dating somebody and he don't deal with his other kids, he's probably not going to do for your kids. Like unless he has a heart to heart come to Jesus moment and starts, living his life better. But even still, that means you need to go back and start making him be responsible for his other children. If he's already like using my biological father as an example, if he's already sleeping around with the rest of the neighborhood, then why do that? And so of course we know that God allows things to happen, for his purpose. But I think that so starting just from me being birthed without having my father to then being raised by someone who and I all like my stepfather, I love him to life because when and I maybe it's just my natural character that God created me, but this is another thing that goes back to having conversations with your parents. For me, the reason I'm able to see all any parental relationship I've had, the reason I'm able to see it the way I am is because I give them grace. Like I have to sit. I'm about to be 33 on Saturday, and in my 33 years of living, especially being a mom of four, there are days when I think back to when I was angry at my mom for sitting in her room all weekend. Now I can say I get it because of where even though I've grown, I would say a couple steps further than where my mom was at 33, I still get it because I'm still learning, I'm still growing. And there are some days where it's that difficult. And so um for my stepfather, like I commend him because I'm like they were in their 20s and I was like 6 months old and he's like this is my kid, like, and to this day I'm 33 with my own kids. That is my family. Like it's nothing but our DNA that says otherwise. Like he's checking up on us, he's calling us, like it's not his, and not just him, his entire family. So it's and even when we say things like that, it's like, what do you mean you're not we not related? Like we forget sometimes. Like, but even in they got divorced, right? And I was young, but I remember sitting down and having a conversation with him when they were going through the divorce, and he was like, you don't have to. If you don't want to call me dad anymore, you don't have to. If you don't want to come over anymore, you don't have to. And I was confused because I'm like, what else I'm gonna do over my life? Like that's just what it is. But I think that one thing that at least I've learned in parenting, um, and there are people who still to this day disagree with this, but I think that we need to stop separating having certain conversations with kids just because they're small, because the only difference is the fact that they haven't been on earth as long as you. So it's not that you can't have conversations with them. You don't need to not talk to your children about divorce and relationships. You just need to break it down to an elementary level. You don't
Yeah.
need to not talk to your kids about sexual experiences. You need to break it down to an elementary level because these things are happening in the world around them, and you're not always going to be around. You're not always present. And so that would be like my first, I guess, example of I didn't know what was happening. I just knew y'all were getting divorced, but it didn't make sense to me because and he was a fun dad. So I was just like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why y'all aren't staying together. But I didn't have the words to communicate that because we didn't have that relationship with them growing up. Like they were the parent and we were the child, and that was it. At that time in our lives. And so had we had that conversation, maybe that would have given me another level of understanding when she went into the next relationship. Because when she into her next relationship, I was looking at it like, well, first of all, when you met this person, they weren't doing nothing. And now this person, it was like I met this person not doing anything, and now this person is literally controlling every aspect of my life in what I felt like as a teenager, or I don't even think I was a teenager yet. Um, I felt like it was ruining my life. Now, as an adult, there are certain parts of that relationship where I can say, okay, this helped me in this area, this helped me in this area. But as a child, it's like, okay, you went from this relationship. I don't understand what went wrong with this one. Now you're with this person who's the totally opposite of this person. And now because she's growing, she's more mature. Now she's looking at it from even though this person is messed up, this is my husband and this is God, husband, children, right? But when you didn't have, like, when you didn't grow up with that, that doesn't make sense. It's just like when we stopped celebrating Halloween. We celebrated Halloween for years, and all of a sudden, we don't celebrate Halloween. A child doesn't understand all of it. Children don't get that. So you gotta have these conversations with them so that they can understand. And so again, here we are in a whole nother relationship, and you're just changing stuff on us without explanation, just because where we grew up, it was because I said so. That is one, and I feel like maybe it's mostly the Black community that does it, but that is very negative to children, because just because they're younger doesn't mean they don't understand. And you don't want a child understanding something from their perspective, because it's going to make them go to complete opposite more times than not. They're just going to want to completely run away from what you're saying or doing. Um, and so that's, I would say that's why I didn't really have a healthy understanding of um, the parent relationship, because I just I saw working and not doing anything in the house, and then I saw not working. Like, then I saw it. I just saw instability, if that's the word, when
Mhm.
it came to being a team, looking at you guys as parents. And so when I decided to get into relationships, I was just looking for someone to actually show me attention, because I wasn't getting that at home, because I was the oldest of six. My mom felt like I was smart enough, mature enough, that she didn't really have to nurture me. And children have, this is a sidebar, children have different personality types. Like, I have four kids. One of my oldest, she's a lot like me. You just cannot give this girl enough attention. It's never enough. Then my other one, my second daughter, she's kind of like, let me love on you when I want to, but when you do it, it's a problem. Uh, that's a lyric to a song, but when I do it, it's a problem. And so growing up, like, my mom just didn't give me the attention that I felt I needed, and so I started looking for that in relationships, and I was always picking wrong. And then I met my husband, and he was like a unicorn. So I was like, oh my God, you don't want to be a rapper, you don't want to be an athlete, like, you don't want to be a drug dealer, like, you're trying to create businesses, blah blah blah. And that's a story for another day. But when we got married, I was just like, wait a minute, like, I'm used to having, like, and then because we got married, we had our daughter, within a year. We both were on the same page about me being a stay-at-home mom, because I wanted to be present, because I felt like my mom couldn't be, because she was either working or just mentally not present because of what she had going on. And thankfully we were on the same page with that. But with that came us having to have conversations. Like, when it came to him leaving, I didn't see my mom being submissive. I saw her being submissive, but I saw her being submissive to toxicity. And so all I knew was, I'm not doing that. Like, you're not about to tell me what to do, how to do it. And unless I ask you, and even then, I'm probably still going to weigh what you're saying to what I want to do. When it came to finances, I remember our first year filing taxes as married. This is why to this day, Stephen does not trust me to file taxes, because I was like, when we filed taxes for the first year, we got married in December. So we're coming up on our 9-year anniversary. We filed taxes, we self-filed our taxes. And when I put in our information as married, it made say it was getting less money. And that didn't make sense to me, because he hadn't worked that year, because he had just come back from a contract job, and his money was tax free. So he hadn't worked, but I had worked the whole year. And I'm like, why am I not getting my money back? Because I'm married all of a sudden. So to this day, I am not allowed to file a tax. We file a tax with H&R Block. Um, but things like that, because I saw my mom, like, I saw her listening to people who weren't leading her well. She was still having to do a lot of stuff on her own. And I was just determined that I wasn't doing that. And so when it came to trying to parent our kids, a lot of times I felt like I was trying to tell him what to do versus understanding that he has a right because they're his kids too. And he is like he's not a deadbeat. He's not lazy or he's not any of the negative traits that I was accustomed to seeing. And so not only did it affect our marriage, it did affect our parenting because I was just like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. I know, and he's the youngest too. So it was twofold. It was like, you don't know what you're talking about because you didn't have to raise anybody. And then also you did, like, to an extent, he had healthier relationships to an extent, versus what I had. So it was like, well, you don't know because you haven't experienced X, Y, and Z. And so it did affect me negatively because I didn't see it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I just want to I want to piggyback off of what you said about not having those examples there, because I really want people to understand, especially if there's anybody who's watching or who might catch this replay that may have younger children, because I really want everybody to understand the context in which she's speaking, which you're speaking from, is based upon, like you said, the where I was at, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and that literally would be a conversation for another whole day, right? And
Mhm.
so it's one of those situations where I know, like I might say to you, what, TeLeah, like, come on now, no, you're wrong. Like, no, you're not right. Then she'd be like, but he, no, it ain't no but he, and so, but what's really crazy, and I was literally just sharing, I don't know who I was talking to the other night, but I was literally just sharing with them how, like, in the midst of the conversation, the Lord took me back to, and it was so vivid. It was so vivid till it made my stomach churn, because I remember moving, and in the midst of me moving, I was like, I can't wait to get away from this joker. I'm ready to file for my divorce, blah 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 blah, da 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 da. And that didn't happen, because I remember the Lord saying to me, I gave you a way out. This time you're going to stay until I release you. And I was like, wait, what? Hold on. Pause. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can I get a redo? Can I get a redo? Wait a minute. And I remember him saying, now you're going to learn how to be a wife. Now you're going to learn to humble yourself. And it's like, I wasn't humble enough. I wasn't being humble enough. I wasn't submitting enough. Like, what you mean? Said, now you're going to learn to keep your mouth shut. What you say? First of all, that's difficult for me to do because I have an opinion about everything.
Everything.
But he taught me literally how to keep my mouth closed. And I literally had to go. This was after TeLeah had left, right? And y'all hear her talking about seeing me be submissive to somebody who wasn't, didn't qualify for me to be submissive to. But any of us that know the word know that God don't call us just like parents. He didn't say honor thy father and thy mother if your parents is good, if they give you whatever you want. He just said honor your father and your mother so that your days will be long upon the land. And when it comes to the wife being submissive, he just simply said, wives, submit to your husband. But he also told the husbands to love your wives as Christ loved the church. However, you ain't got nothing to do with what he don't do. The only thing you can do is what God told you to do. And that's one of the conversations that she and I have often. Not that they have any, serious conflict in their relationship, but there's sometimes when the Antoinette in her will rise up and she be wanting to do stuff her way. And it's like, yeah, you can't do it that way. You just gotta operate the way God, declares that you operate. And it don't feel good. It does not feel good when you got to do what God told you to do, regardless to what he do. It don't matter how hard-headed he is, you still got to do what God told you to do. And that's all that matters. Because you're gonna stand together as one, but when you face judgment, you just gonna be standing there by yourself. And he gonna be like, why didn't you submit to your husband? And you gonna be like, cuz I don't know. Because that's all you're gonna be able to say. And so, but it was one of those, like I said, it was that situation where, imagine if she's telling y'all, I was submissive in a relationship that it didn't even deserve me being submissive to. Imagine them 4 years that I had to submit. And at that time, because my ex-husband was never verbally abusive or anything like that. He was annoying, but he wasn't one of those ones. Like, of course, we argued and cussed each other out, but he wasn't one of those ones that he would come in talking sideways and, just being verbally abusive and, talking crazy to the kids and that type of stuff. But them last 4 years, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I was like, woo. And I couldn't, the difference was I couldn't cuss him out back, right? Because anybody that know the old Miss Ann know that I would cuss somebody out in a New York minute, right? But I couldn't do none of that. I had to just be like, okay, God, any day now, because I don't want to go to prison. I don't want to belong to Big Bertha. I don't. And so it was not having a healthy, not knowing what a healthy parental bond looked like, right? Those are things like TeLeah and I were talking the other day, and we were talking, I was saying, and we were kind of, going back and forth on the fact that there's different levels of poverty. There's mental poverty, there's financial poverty, there's spiritual poverty, there's emotional poverty. As a matter of fact, I talk about spiritual poverty in my book, Identity Theft, Reclaiming Your Victory. I talk about being spiritually impoverished, right? And so,
I want to add something too.
give me 1 second. And so, as it relates to, you made me forget what I was going to say. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when it comes to like not having a healthy parental bond, you can
Yes,
also
that's what I was talking
complete.
about.
You can also, like how I was saying, like it caused conflict with trying to parent with my husband. You can also negatively affect your children when you don't have that for whatever reason, whether it's because your parent passed away or they just weren't there or they like you said, overindulged. I know my grandmother kind of did that on and off with them and with her grandchildren. Um, it'll cause you to overly do for your children. So it's
Mhm.
like, for example, you can be like, if your child's father isn't present or mother, whichever, then all of a sudden you find yourself when you don't have a healthy thought process when it comes to parent bonds, you find yourself doing things like, well, oh, I got to do more for my kid because this other parent is in here, and that's not the case. And I think I was having this conversation with a friend recently, and I was telling her, when you do that, you don't allow, especially for us that are believers, you're not allowing God to be God in their life. You're trying to do it. It's okay to have those conversations with your child about the parent not being there. And I'm just using that as an example because I know that that's a big thing, especially in our community. But it's okay to have those conversations. But at the end of the day, nothing you do is going to replace that parent being present.
Yes.
There is nothing on this earth, like even me having step parents, And I commend my stepfather, but at the end of the day, there's still that part of me that gets upset that my biological father was not a father. He was just doing what he wanted to do. I don't hurt just for myself, but for my siblings too. So if my mom had tried to overcompensate, and she did it, but I believe there were times when my grandmother did more for me, and it made it seem like I was a favorite, but she was doing it because my father wasn't present. But it caused sibling rivalry, because now it's like, oh, well, you get more stuff. And my grandma thought she was doing me a favor by being my dad for me. But it's like, no, you're just giving me more stuff. It's not replacing the fact that I need a father, a man, to lead me through life. And so there's another point I want to say.
Yeah, real good, real good. So and I was gonna say, as it relates to not understanding or not knowing what the healthy parental bond look like, we can pass along generational blessings, we can pass along generational curses. And so one of the things that and this is probably one of the reasons why I often went through a lot of the dysfunctional relationships, because I knew that for me, I looked at the dynamics of the women across my family, nobody was married. And I knew at a very early age, something is wrong here. When you look around the room, it's a bunch of women and no men other than men, children, right? And I knew that there was something wrong with that. And so for me, it was like, I'm not going to have children and not have a husband, right? And my husband and I not be together. So in that sense, when I divorced the first time, my grandmother made it seem like I had committed the worst sin on the earth, and I was never going to be able to ever be forgiven, right? And so the second time I had to make it last. And I had to make sure that I did what was necessary in order to make this marriage not fall apart, right? And so if that meant being submissive to my husband, if that meant following what the Lord told me to do as it related to that, I knew one thing that I understood was, if anything happens in the dynamics of this family, and this is something that I tell my kids when it comes to their marriages, my girls, it don't matter what the man does, because he's the one that's going to be held accountable over the household, right? So anything that happens or doesn't happen in the context in which it's supposed to, God is looking at that man, because he's over you, period. And you are supposed to just simply be submissive. That's what you are told to do. And then let him figure out what God told him to do. Because one thing's for certain and two things for sure. We cannot parent our spouses. Absolutely. So I knew, because I didn't see healthy relationships growing up. My grandmother and my grandfather was divorced. My mom and my dad was separated for many years. And then my senior year of high school, they divorced. That tore me up. They were literally separated for over 20 years, or for over 10 years. But I literally thought they would get back together one day, but they didn't. They divorced, and he got married to somebody else in my senior year of high school. And so when you don't see that, so we have to make sure that we're doing everything possible, according to the word of God, in order to show our children what healthy relationships really look like. And what a healthy relationship looks like is having God as the head, then the husband, then the wife, then the children. That is the healthy dynamic of the relationship as it relates to the family dynamic. And so when it comes to us as mothers, right, we have to keep in mind that we have a criteria of things that we have to keep into perspective. And one of the main things that I always tell my daughter is that, at the end of the day, what does a woman have that a man don't have? She has a womb. Why does she have a womb? Because she's a birther, right? And anything that is going to come out of that household is literally birthed through the woman. It's how she carries herself. Oh, let me stop, because we're getting into huddle stuff, right? So let me stop right there. wrapping up, you already talked about not wanting children of your own, so we're not going to go there. But if somebody were to ask you, what is a Smack Talk huddle? I've never heard of it. What could you tell them in regards to why they should attend the huddle? Not speaking from not speaking from the daughter perspective, right? But just if you were a regular attender of the, oh, you know what? I have to tell this story real quick, y'all. So I had asked her to be a speaker for the huddle, right? And she was like, oh, no, I don't do that. So last year, one of the speakers ended up in the hospital, getting admitted into the hospital, contacted me at midnight and said, I'm so sorry, sis. I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be able to speak tomorrow morning. And so I messaged her and I asked her, hey, um, I need you to speak for the huddle. And she was like, oh, God got jokes. Because in the midst of her having a moment of time by herself, she wrote the Mother's Creed as a result of the Lord speaking to her through a what if. And I just had to tell that story because for anybody who was watching this live, or you might catch the replay, #replay, anybody who's watching this live, if the Lord speaks something to your heart, right? And he starts to prepare you, just know that he's preparing you for the what if situation. And the Bible says to be instant in season as well as out of season. So just know that the very thing that you say no to might be the very thing that God is saying yes. And he's going to place you in the right place at the right time. But what would you say to somebody who is questioning, what is the huddle? What is it all about? Is it worth going 7, 10, 12 hours? Because we do have a speaker that's coming over 12, 13 hours to speak. The huddle is that good. You muted.
I forgot I had hit mute. I think it's definitely worth it. If you don't know, if this is your first time hearing about Smack Talk, Smack stands for sisters, mothers, aunts, and cousins, which is that's all of us, right? If you're a woman, you're bound to be a sister, a mother, an aunt, or a cousin. You something to somebody. And what is special to me about the huddle is that you do have all these women coming from different walks of life. And what made the huddle different than, and I've been to plenty of women's events or networking events, things like that. Like I'm a go places. Um, and what makes the huddle so different is the fact that these are like, when I say real conversations, like, I mean, just how we just had this conversation, that like all the speakers on the panel are going to be talking from a real place of transparency, not from a place of where they desire to be, not from what they've heard someone else say, but they're going to be sharing their own testimonies. And what I believe is transparent. When I say transparency heals, like I mean that. Like you can't help someone else if you're not willing to be honest. And I think that that's what I appreciate about the huddle is that every person that she's ever invited to be a speaker, and because of that, the speakers creates an atmosphere for the attendees to want to open up, and that is where healing really takes place, when you have a sacred and a safe space to be able to say, this is what I'm experiencing and how do I get through it. And so it's not a group of tell all or anything like that. It is women sharing how they've grown out of their dark places, and it creates a space for you to also do that in your own life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's gonna be food. Now, if you're a foodie like me, like why would you want to miss food?
Absolutely. So, for those that have not heard, the huddle started back in 2018. It literally started with just me and a few friends. We got together for a Christmas party because the company that we work for, they didn't do it like that. And so we got together for a Christmas party. But in the midst of that Christmas party, the Holy Spirit came into the room and I literally began to speak a word into them. And as a result of that, they asked me if we could do it again. And so the Smack Talk huddle was birthed. And so, again, we just come together. Again, Smack Talk is all about affirming, confirming, molding, and motivating others to be all they were created to be. And so, in order to do that, we have to be able to come together and uplift, encourage, and support one another. And it's really not about looking down on somebody, because if you knew the everything about me, right, you would literally be looking at me like, girl, whatever, you ain't nobody. But guess what? I am nobody, because it's not about me. It's all about him and what he has done to me and through me. What he has done in my life. I could not tell anybody. There is no way that I could tell anybody about sisterhood if I had not had some hurts in my relationships of sisterhood. I couldn't tell anybody about motherhood had I not been hurt and hurt my own children, my own mother, right? There's no way that I could tell anybody about marriage had I not gone through the two marriages that I was in. There's no way on God's green earth I could even appreciate the husband that I have now, because he is something totally different. There is no way, if my husband that I have now had met me 20 or 30 years ago, I would not appreciate the type of man that he is. Absolutely no way. I would not even appreciate him. I wouldn't know how to appreciate him. There's no way that I would know how. It was because of what I went through that I could look at my husband and I can see genuine love from a man and know how I'm supposed to be treated from a man. Because remember, I didn't have that growing up, right? I didn't have somebody right there in the entire walk of my life showing me how to be loved by a man. And so, even as it relates to being in ministry, the Lord told me my second husband, he told me I didn't give him for you. I gave him to you for ministry. And here I am 10 years later doing Smack Talk, literally. When it comes to my business, had it not been for me being married to my second husband, because we had two businesses, I never would have known what it looked like to start a business. We started from scratch. We started from absolutely nothing. Me, him, and two push mowers out mowing grass. We started a lawn care business and then ended up with a trucking company. I would not have known. Matter of fact, one of the young ladies is here tonight. Through my experience, I was able to show her a part of her business, right? Something that she had never heard of. But I would not have been able to share that information with her had I not been married to the person that I was married to at that time and learning the things that I was learning as it related to business. I wouldn't have a business of my own today. And so I said all of that to say Smack Talk is literally the household brand that you need to be a part of. So again, if you have not joined the Smack Talk community, you need to go ahead and type in Smack Talk community, and you need to join the Smack Talk community. Stay connected. You can also go to WeSmackTalk.com, connect with me there. Again, make sure that you go like and follow Boss Life Mom. And if you have not registered for the annual Smack Talk huddle, make good and do so. For the next 48 hours, tickets will be at a discounted rate. Again, want to make sure that you understand that if you get the discounted ticket, it does not include entry into the drawing for the 55-inch television and the Samsung Chromebook. If you get the discounted ticket, you will have to purchase a raffle ticket. You will only have a raffle ticket for the prizes that are drawn at the huddle. Okay. Yes, I told her about the Dunn's number. And so we're going to have an amazing time. We're going to have an amazing time. So even if you cannot join, if you can't make it to Michigan to come to the Smack Talk huddle, if you can't come to the huddle, if you live in Michigan, You can always sponsor a ticket for somebody. You can always just be a sponsor. If you have a business, definitely you can sponsor the huddle. If you believe in anything that you have heard on tonight, just be sure to connect with us. And as they say in the Baptist church, if all minds are clear, all minds are clear. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. Please make sure that you share the live. Again, please make sure that you share the live. And if you're catching the replay, please hashtag replay. We will come back and respond to all of your comments throughout the live. And so thank you once again, TeLeah. I love you so much. I love you as a sister. I love you as a mother. I love you as an aunt. I love you as a cousin. I always say, you guys are my children by relationship, but we are brothers and sisters in the body of Christ. And I thank you so much for all that you pour out. I believe in you. I know that you believe in me, and we're going to keep rocking out together, baby.
All right, all right, all
For the
right.
rest of you guys, as always, imparting, not Don Cornelius, but definitely Mrs. Ann. Don't forget, go and talk smack to somebody. You guys have an amazing rest of your night.